think we've got everyone in. We got a couple more people filtering in, but I am here with Terry Lucas and Mara Zonderman, and I think we're going to kick it off with talking the Bill of Rights. First off, I wanted to thank Nola Thacker for the idea and for wrangling Terry and Mara into it, because without her, we may not have this program. And I've got a quick list of all the East End public libraries that are joining us for this program. Naturally, Shelter Island Public Library and Westhampton Free Library, Amagansett Public Library, Cutchogue Public Library, East Hampton Public Library, Floyd Memorial, Hampton Bays, Mattatuck Laurel, New Suffolk, Quogue, Southold, Port Jefferson, and Riverhead Public Library. So thank you all so much. And with that, I will turn it over to Terry and Mara.
Hi, Mara, you want to kick it off?
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us on this cold Friday night. My name is Mara Zonderman. I am the head of reference and adult services at the Westhampton Free Library. And like Terry, I am a lapsed lawyer. And I also will thank Nola, who I can see down the hall there, for once again talking us into doing a program, because we always have a great time. So Terry, do you want to introduce yourself real quick while I share my screen?
Sure. I'm Terry Lucas. I'm the director of the Shelter Island Public Library. I was previously an attorney and a bookstore owner. So as with the attorney background, Mara and I both got to take constitutional law. So this is a subject dear to both of our hearts, I believe. So Mara.
Yeah. All right. So we're talking about the Bill of Rights. But why are we talking about the Bill of Rights, right? We're celebrating the semisesquicentennial, which anybody around here will tell you I use any excuse to use that word as often as I can. But we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So why are we talking about the Bill of Rights? Well, that is a good question. Partly because the Declaration of Independence is the foundational document of this country. And it leads to everything that comes afterwards. So we couldn't have a conversation about the Bill of Rights without talking about the Declaration. But also, and more directly, lots of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were written in direct response to the history of repeated injuries and usurpations that the colonies had been subjected to, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. And those quotes are taken directly from the Declaration. And I'm just going to show you quickly, we'll get more into detail about it later, what I mean by that. So here we have the Declaration, the Constitution, and those are all pullouts, language that was used from the Declaration that led directly into the Constitution. And I know it went by super fast, and it's really small. So Sarah, if you could put that first link in the chat, I highly recommend Akil Amar's analysis, and he annotates the Declaration and tells you a lot about where each part comes from, and then where it led to also. So hopefully I can't actually see the chat, but I'm sure Sarah's on top of it.
Got it.
So that's why we're talking about the Bill of Rights, even though we're celebrating the Declaration. And before we do that, Terry, you want to kick us off with some history of the Constitution?
Sure. So basically, in order to understand the need for a Bill of Rights, we need to cover a little bit of history. And I don't know about all of you, but the last time I learned this was in school many, many years ago. So I needed a little refresher as we started preparing for this project. And I had a lot of fun going back and kind of re-upping on the history. So here we are. There's just a little bit of history here. So the Declaration of Independence was adopted in 1776. In order to fight the British, the 13 states formed an alliance to help win the war. And this alliance was governed by the Articles of Confederation. And they weren't really a national constitution. They were kind of more of a treaty between almost like 13 separate countries. The alliance was this Congress of Confederation gave each state one vote. They were in effect from 1781 to 1789, and 8 individuals were appointed by this Congress for 1-year term. And during that term, that individual was referred to as the President of the United States in Congress. Oh, in Congress assembled. Some of the presidents included John Hanson of Maryland, Richard Henry Lee from Virginia, and John Hancock of Massachusetts, who was most of the time trying to hide from the British because he was highly wanted. So after the war ended, it became clear that the Confederation was not working well. There was insufficient power in a central government. The states would not allow taxation that was necessary to pay war debts and to pay the salaries of the soldiers. It was impossible to regulate foreign and interstate commerce when each state had its own rules and regulations. And states began to issue their own currency, and there was a massive post-war economic depression, which affected the people in rural areas more. So this led to an armed uprising in Western Massachusetts by those who resisted paying taxes. And this was 1786, 1787. Those in this rural area of Massachusetts, they kind of depended on bartering and credit and trading back and forth in order to live. That was, they did not depend on paper money. But yet here with the government came and started taxing them, and they were losing their farms. They were losing their livelihoods. So Daniel Shays, a 39-year-old farmer, organized the local farmers into a fighting force. And they marched through the western part of the state, and they seized court buildings. They prevented the governments from taking their farm. They tried to take the arsenal in Springfield, Massachusetts, and they planned to confront the government in Boston. But since the Congress didn't have power to raise an army, they didn't have much power at all. The Massachusetts militia finally had to quell the rebellion. So Shays' Rebellion kind of was the kicking off point for realizing that these Articles of Confederation were not really strong enough to govern the country. So it was clear to many that the Republic was going to fall apart, and they'd worked so hard for this freedom, and they were so concerned that this was just going to all go for nothing. So James Madison felt that sovereign and independent states were on the brink of economic collapse, and a strong central government could bring order and stability. So Madison and Alexander Hamilton called on Congress to call a convention. They really were talking about initially just revising the Articles of Confederation. So in February of 1787, the Continental Congress called the convention to meet in Philadelphia. Can we do the next slide? Thank you. So 74 delegates were summoned. 55 actually attended. Rhode Island refused to send any delegates. Rhode Island was not having it. A lot of them were suspicious about Madison. They were suspicious of a strong central government. They were suspicious they were going to go back to a situation where there was a king telling them what to do. Many felt the state governments were better for protecting personal liberties, which is going to bring us to the Bill of Rights in a little bit. So, but they decided to go forward with this and try to make some changes to make things better. On May 25th, 1787, George Washington was elected president of the convention. He almost didn't attend. He was tired. He was kind of running his farm. He was kind of doing his thing. And he was just he was afraid that if he did attend and it all went for nothing, it would ruin his reputation. But he went, and he became president of the convention, eventually another president. But, and basically he sat at the front of this room and kind of presided over. And he didn't give a lot of opinions. He tried to keep the peace. He kind of kept himself a little bit aloof from the proceedings. He said that a thorough reform of the present system is indispensable. None who have the capabilities to judge will deny. And with hand and heart, I hope the business will be essayed in a full convention. He wore his old military uniform and sat at the front of the room. So one of the main things they did at the very first here was they adopted a secrecy rule. They, as you can see in this picture, they closed the windows. It was hot and it was miserable. It was the spring into the summer, but they closed the windows. They did not want people listening in. And the reason they did that was so that people could change their mind. So Madison wrote, I think the rule was a prudent one. Not only will it effectively secure the requisite freedom of discussion, but it will save both the convention and the community from 1,000 erroneous and perhaps mischievous reports. So they did not want people gossiping about with this, taking things back to their states and causing problems, because they knew they had a lot of people that weren't going to agree on everything. So delegates included James Madison, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, who was suffering from gout and miserable, James Wilson, Alexander Hamilton, John Dickinson of Delaware, Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania. Other delegates had studied law, they'd served in Congress or on their state legislatures. So these were all men of a certain standing. We did not have any of Daniel Shay's farmers in this group, but they were all educated men who wanted to make the country better. So they started debating, and originally Virginia came up with a plan, and Virginia was smart because they proposed a strong national government. So they kind of used that as a starting point and saying, okay, this is what we're going to have. We're going to have a strong national government, and it's going to have three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. And there were checks and balances designed. So, we're kind of getting the idea, this is how it's going to go forward. But it was so strong that it kind of wiped out the idea of states' rights. So that was not going to fly. Then New Jersey came up with a plan, and they had a central government which completely swallowed state sovereignty and was not popular with many delegates. So they wanted to have a union of states, merely federal. And so the New Jersey plan went down in flames. And the point of it was that they just really needed to raise revenue, and they needed a way to do that. They needed a way to tax. They needed to regulate commerce, both interstate commerce and foreign commerce. And they needed to ratify treaties because they had to make friends with these other countries. So then Hamilton came along, and he proposed an executive to serve for life as long as he behaved, and who would have veto power over all the laws. A Senate with members serving during good behavior, and a legislator that could pass all laws. So this seemed to be headed toward a monarchy, and nobody wanted this one. So they continued to wrangle. Next slide, please. So we have the South and we have the North. And by June, the fights about representation based on population began to break out between the larger states and the smaller states. And the smaller states were in the South, and the larger states were in the North. Roger Sherman of Connecticut proposed that only free inhabitants of the state should count for representation. But Edward Rutledge and Pierce Butler of South Carolina proposed what became the 3/5 compromise, suggesting that the House seats be apportioned in proportion to the whole number of white and other free citizens and inhabitants of every age, sex, and condition, including those bound to servitude for a term of years, and 3/5 of all other persons not comprehended in the foregoing description, which was a very tricky dance around enslavement, except Indians not paying taxes. So then they were wiped out as well. So this proposal was not accepted initially. So they formed a committee to talk about apportionment, and they had discussion after discussion. They could not reach agreement. The 3/5 compromise resurfaced. And so several delegates from the slave-owning states, led by Pierce Butler, proposed counting enslaved persons as equivalent to free inhabitants of the states. And that would mean enslaved persons would be able to add to each state's population as though they were free citizens, despite the fact they had no voting rights or civil liberties. This would allow slave states to have more power in the House of Representatives without granting enslaved people any rights. So this again was voted down. So finally, in July, they went back and they formed what they called the Great Compromise, which is not so great. It was based on the whole number of white inhabitants and 3/5 of all other persons. This is one of the more shameful things about our Constitution, but it was deemed necessary to avoid a complete breakdown of the convention. And then after this, another fight about the representation in the Senate cleared up, and equal representation in the Senate was approved. So next slide. So we had some other controversies and compromises. Monday, August 6, 1787, the convention accepted the first draft of the Constitution, and the debate began again. There was serious controversy over the question of regulation of commerce, and this again became linked to the issue of slavery. And they started doing backroom deals. I mean, I keep on thinking of Hamilton, and no one's in the room where it happened. They made all these deals, and they came back allowing slave importation for another 20 years. It started off with a few years, 5 years, 2 years, and they came back after these deals with 20 years. So the end of August, the issue of the lack of Bill of Rights showed up. And George Mason said that the Constitution was ill-advised because there was no Bill of Rights ensuring individual liberties. So that was an issue. And one of the last unresolved issues was how to elect the executive. And that resulted in another compromise, which was the creation of the Electoral College, which I'm sure we could have a lovely debate on that at some point. But for now, we just know that it was an issue, and it became one of the compromises that went into finally making a constitution. So by September 17th, after this long, hot summer in a room that was completely closed up, the Constitution was unanimously approved by every member of the delegation. And on September 17th, it was also signed by all but George Mason, Elbridge Gerry, and Edmund Randolph. At one point, it started off that's named all the states, and Governor Moore, his name is Governor. It's Gouverneur. That's his first name. So Gouverneur or Governor Morris made a change to say that we, the people of the United States, which was such a strong statement that we weren't a bunch of individual states. We were the people of the United States. So 39 signed, and some refused because there was no Bill of Rights. Federalists supported the Constitution. Anti-Federalists did not. Okay, so the next slide, please. Pennsylvania was the first state to call a ratifying convention. Passions were hot, and when not enough delegates showed up, a mob dragged 2 anti-Federalist members from their lodgings to the State House and forced them to sit and stay while the assembly voted. And that's how they got it to pass, because they needed a quorum. And in New York, the Constitution was under attack, causing Hamilton, John Jay, and Madison to publish the Federalist Papers, which again, thank you, Hamilton the Musical, which we all know about. So anti-Federalists attacked the Constitution because it lacked a Bill of Rights. It discriminated against Southern states, and it raised concerns about the loss of state sovereignty. There was a concern that elite and aristocratic politicians were cut out by cutting out all the simple people. And there was a claim that the territory was just too big for this kind of a government. It was never going to work. By January 1788, 5 of the 9 necessary states had ratified the Constitution. And then on February 6, Massachusetts ratified based on the promise of the Federalists, agreeing to recommend amendments which were basically the Bill of Rights. And by July 1788, 9 states had ratified, and the Congress appointed a committee for putting this Constitution into operation. Only the promise of amendments ensured a Federalist victory for this Constitution. I want to conclude our little recap by making the making of the Constitution with a statement made by Benjamin Franklin, which is up here. In these sentiments, sir, I agree to this Constitution with all of its faults, if they are such, because I think a general government necessary for us. And there is no form of government but what may be a blessing to the people if well administered, and believe farther that this is likely to be well administered for a course of years, and can only end in despotism as other forms have done before it, when the people shall become so corrupted as to need despotic government, being incapable of any other. I doubt, too, whether any other convention we can obtain may be able to make a better constitution. For when you assemble a number of men to have the advantage of their joint wisdom, you inevitably assemble with those men all their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinion, their local interests, and their selfish views. For such an assembly can a perfect production be expected. It therefore astonishes me, sir, to find this system approaching so near to perfection as it does, and I think it will astonish our enemies, who are waiting with confidence to hear that our counsels are confounded like those of the builders of Babel, and that our states are on the point of separation, only to meet hereafter for the purpose of cutting one another's throats. Thus I consent, sir, to this constitution, because I expect no better, and because I'm not sure that it is not the best. So we end with the words of Benjamin Franklin and move on to our subject, which is that good old Bill of Rights. Maura?
Yes, thank you. Oh, I was some slides behind you. Okay, so where did they get this idea of the Bill of Rights? I mean, they didn't just, spontaneously come up with this idea that there should be an enumeration of the rights. And remember, the Constitution is a framework for how government works, but it doesn't say very much about the interaction between the government and the people. So the Bill of Rights came from the Magna Carta. Actually, it goes back to the early 13th century. Ever since the Magna Carta included a provision that all legal proceedings and prosecutions be undertaken according to the law of the land, or with what we would now call due process of law. In the intervening 500 years, Great Britain had expanded its enumerated protections on more than one occasion, including in 1689, when Parliament adopted the Bill of Rights, which not only gives its name to our Bill of Rights, but also shares some of the specific rights that are protected, including the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment and on excessive bail or fines. So there was precedent for this. They had it already in mind. And also the erstwhile 13 colonies, now the 13 United States, had begun drafting and in many cases had adopted their own state constitutions. And all of them included some statements about the rights of the people. A lot of them are very similar, but they all had something, and it was either incorporated directly into the state constitution or listed out separately as amendments, as we would do on the federal level. And as Terry said, this lack of a Bill of Rights was a major sticking point for some of the delegates. And really it was the compromise that, the promise that we would include a Bill of Rights that allowed them to vote in favor of the Constitution. And they did. One of the first orders of business of the first Congress was to start talking about a Bill of Rights. And James Madison was tasked with drafting it. So how did we get to these 10? Well, we actually started with 20. And, the Bill of Rights, as we say at home, we put it right in the name. It's a bill, right? It had to go through Congress and be passed like every bill since. And if you need a refresher on that, I do refer you to Schoolhouse Rock's little video about I'm Just a Bill, which hopefully Sarah's popping in the chat right now. Thank you. It's a favorite in my house. So Madison's original bill included language reinforcing the strict separation of powers, specifically precluding state governments from infringing on the equal rights of conscience or the freedom of the press or the trial by jury in criminal cases, and also appended an additional clause to what would become the Second Amendment, specifying that no person religiously scrupulous of bearing arms shall be compelled to render military service in person. But as the bill went through the process in Congress, that was taken out, and Congress eventually adopted 12 amendments. So they sent those to the states, and 10 were approved by the state conventions or legislatures, however each state had set it up. Just to let you know, the first two that Madison had included were actually to the two that were left out by the states. So what we consider the First Amendment was really the Third Amendment, and so on. But the first one that Madison had would have set forth a formula for setting the number of representatives based on the population of the US in 1789, which seems remarkably not forward-thinking for someone like Madison, but doesn't matter. It's literally history. His Second Amendment prevents Congress from voting itself a raise. In other words, if Congress votes a raise, it doesn't take effect until the next Congress. And that eventually would be ratified in 1992 and would become our 27th and most recent amendment. And that is one of my favorite factoids in American history. And I think that's just great that it hung on, because some amendments come with a, Terry, what's the word? Like they sort of die if they're not ratified. But this one just kept going until.
Oh, kind of like a trigger date that you have
Yes,
to,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
All right. So we ratified, the states ratified the 10 amendments, what we now call the Bill of Rights. So here we are. And over the next several months, we're going to become more familiar with the Bill of Rights. I think we're all going to learn an awful lot. But I had mentioned the Declaration, and I showed you briefly the parts that was just Article 1 of the Constitution, how much of that came directly from the Declaration. I want to show you the same thing for the Bill of Rights. So in the Declaration, we have, actually, I'm going to go back. Everybody's hopefully familiar with the beginning, when in the course of human events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we submit these facts to a candid world, is how they end this sort of introductory paragraph. And then the whole middle section of the Declaration is what's called the list of grievances. And it's all the ways that they feel the king, very specifically, although sometimes Parliament as well, has wronged them as colonists, as subjects of the British Crown. So one of the ways is in every stage of these oppressions, and we'll talk about some of the oppressions in a minute, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. They would make sure, in the very first amendment, Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And a petition at the time meant something very, very specific. And in fact, the continental congresses had sent a couple of formal petitions to the king, which he ignored. So, I mean, I guess the government can still ignore your petition, but you are guaranteed that you always have the right to petition your government for a redress of grievances. Next up, what did they do? They quartered large bodies of armed troops among us, which you may recognize as the Third Amendment. No soldier shall, in times of, can't see because the people are in the way, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war. So, peacetime, wartime, no soldiers can be quartered in your house. What else? For protecting them being British officials, by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit. That's a reference to the Administration of Justice Act. Oh, I'm getting a correction. Did I say Second Amendment? I meant Third Amendment. Thank you, Sam. It's a reference to the Administration of Justice Act of 1774, which shielded royal officials in Massachusetts specifically from being tried by local juries for murder or other capital crimes, and instead allowed them to go back to Great Britain to stand trial. Similarly, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses. That's a reference to a 1772 act that allowed colonists accused of destroying British military property to be sent to Great Britain for trial. Those would become part of the Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. So not just the country, not just the state, but the district. And as you know, that includes being tried by a jury of one's peers. Oh, okay. Thank you, Sam. Sam says I said it right. He's just impressed that I mentioned the Third Amendment. Thank you. What else? For depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury. That's a reference to the Sugar Act of 1764 and the Stamp Act of 1765, which transferred customs cases from colonial courts to juryless vice admiralty courts presided over by royal judges who, incidentally, collected fees from litigation and would translate into the part of the Seventh Amendment, which protects against juryless trials in civil cases. So previously we were talking about criminal cases. Now we're talking about civil cases. In suits at common law, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. So that is, whoops, too fast. That is why we're talking about the Bill of Rights, because there is a direct line from the Bill of Rights back to the Declaration of Independence, from the Constitution back to the Declaration of Independence. And before we talk about what, how this series is going to play out, Terry, you have a mnemonic for us, right?
I do.
I've been waiting a long time for this.
So apparently in 7th grade or 6th grade or somewhere, many teachers teach you how to remember the first 10 amendments. So let me get my little cheat sheet here. So, and it's a little hand play thing. So your First Amendment is RAPS, and it's religion, where you point to God. It is assembly, where you say, come join me. It is petition. It is freedom of the press, and it is freedom of speech. So that's number one. That's the most complicated one. The Second Amendment, you make a little gun. You have a right to keep and bear arms. The Third Amendment, you do this. So what you're doing is 3 is a crowd. This is a quarter. You can't put the 3 into the quarter. Okay. Fourth Amendment is you make a fist and you knock on the door. No unlawful search and seizure, the right to be secure in your person against that unreasonable intrusion. Number 5, you cannot be required to incriminate yourself. This is all due process. And these are a little more complicated, but these are the basics of these. 6, in criminal cases, you point to your wrist. You have a right to a speedy trial. 7, you put up 2 fingers for any civil case that's over $20. You have a right to a jury trial. Okay, this is 8. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. This is the 8. So basically, there should not be cruel and unusual punishment. These are very tight handcuffs. They're very bad. 9, whoop, whoop. You have power to the people. So anything that's not explicitly stated does not deny other rights that the people may have. And 10, back off Fed. If not designated to the federal government, it goes back to the states. So this is how you remember your Bill of Rights, and just use your little fingers. There we go.
I love that. My teachers did not teach me that.
Didn't learn it either, but there are many videos out there if you want to Google it, because some of them have little songs, and there's other things. But I found that after so much history, we maybe needed a little bit something simple and light to get us through.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's where we are.
I can totally see my first con law professor. That would have been awesome. Yeah. Okay, let's talk just a little bit, because we have a whole series of webinars for you. So just to let you know what's coming up and how we're planning to break this down. So those of you who are registered through your library, you should also now be able to register for our February session, which will cover the First Amendment on February 27th. And then, we're going to go through the amendments. And as you can see, we're not going to spend an entire session on each and every one, because some of them, Third Amendment, I'm talking about you, there's just not a lot to say, but expect some special guest stars when we talk about the Third Amendment. And they all are going to meet on Friday, except, as you can see, that is not a typo. Our last session will be Thursday, September 17th, because the timing worked out. And you may recall, Terry said the Constitution was ratified on September 17th. So that is Constitution Day. And it just seemed way too perfect to pass up an opportunity to wrap us up on Constitution Day. So as far as introduction, I think that's it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Sarah, do we have questions?
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but if anyone does have any, please feel free to type them and I'm happy to read them out loud.
We have plenty of time also, Sarah. I don't know if this format allows us to allow people to unmute themselves and ask their questions. It
I
does?
could stop the recording and then we could do that. Yeah. I just didn't necessarily want everyone's names to be public while we were recording.
They can raise their hand. I guess
Yeah.
if they raise their hands, we're gonna see names. But if people don't mind that their names shown up, that's fine. So, but I know this was dense and it was quite a bit of information, but I think we need to lay the groundwork before we dive in because it's important to know where we came from as we go and see where we've gone and how each of these amendments has morphed and changed and been interpreted by different Supreme Courts as we've been going along. And I think that as we go forward, we're going to be looking at them and seeing, how they've been interpreted, how they've been changed, how they've been stretched, and sometimes how they've been contracted, and the law, what the law has done to these seemingly simple amendments. So that's where we are.
Except for the last two, which nobody thought was simple, and frankly, nobody knows what they mean still to this day. But we'll get there. We have all the way until August.
Okay. Jean Marie says to everyone, all very enlightening, no questions, but thank you. And Sam says, it's been years since the last amendment has been adopted other than the usual 27th Amendment. What do you think the next amendment will be? Oh, Sam Schneider. Okay, let's see.
Well, let me pull out my crystal ball.
Let's see.
And frankly, I'm sort of scared to speculate.
Yeah, yeah, I really can't imagine because it feels like it's more likely that something might be reinterpreted rather than well, we did, yeah, ERA, Kathy Candy.
Yeah, but
yeah, so yeah.
didn't.
If we had a constitutional convention, would we get the same rights right now?
That's a very interesting question.
I wonder. I just, you know what? It's things that seem very simple and true back in a different time. And we're so kind of ingrained, and now things are complicated, and these rights have been complicated by the interpretation. So I don't know if we could come up with 10, that's for sure.
I think for all that's going on politically, I think some of these ideas are so ingrained in our idea of ourselves as Americans that we would see a lot of similarities. That might be wishful thinking, but I think so. But I hope that they would be written less vaguely, some of them. Some of them more vaguely, because we do have 200 and some odd years of interpretation, and some of that is the court saying, I don't know what we're supposed to do with this. Does it mean this? I don't know. And certainly the world we have today, in terms of technology, largely, the founders could not have foreseen the way we communicate today, or a lot of what the world looks like today. So I think we would see some changes there. But I hope that we would get most of the same.
We get there, right? I do have a recommendation, and while I'm doing this, what do you think about the ERA, Maura?
I mean, I wish we had it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was reading something. I don't even remember what I was reading, but one of the characters in a book I was reading was talking about how she opposed the ERA at the time. It was historical fiction. And because, why do I need the Constitution to tell me that I should be treated the same as everybody, as a woman?
Mm,
Why do I need that? Um, and I get that, except
mm.
we needed it at the time, and
We
it's
needed it,
hard
yeah.
to, yeah.
And
So
it's hard to say that it seems that in some ways we're kind of going back in a different direction, that we may need it again. So, I think if you're older, and I in the 70s wore my ERA button, and would like to think that I'm not going to have to still wear it until I'm 90, but there we
yeah, I
go.
think you might want to dust that off.
Somebody asked if we had recommendation books to read about the Bill of Rights, and there is a new book that is in our collection that's actually sitting on my desk right now, called "We the People" by Jill Lepore. And
Mm-hmm.
it's about this big, but I've kind of been flipping through it and digging through it, and I'm finding it really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's any others that
We can put together a bibliography.
I think that's a good
I
idea.
can try to send that out.
And for anybody at your libraries right now, if you go into your library, you should be able to pick up a little tiny pocket constitution. We all have these out at our libraries. It's blurry
we
because it's
we
not
haven't
reading.
actually gotten ours yet.
You haven't got it? Oh, well,
Mhm.
Shelter Island is
Soon.
ahead of things. But
Mm,
so we have these out on the table. You can come and pick them up. And even just reading through the Constitution is eye-opening, because you think you know it and you
yeah.
don't.
I,
So
and
yeah,
I highly recommend actually reading the Declaration of Independence because they knew how to use language.
yeah,
It's pretty
yeah.
pretty great.
It's beautiful.
Um, Noel questions the Electoral College. I think that's actually if I were gonna predict the next amendment, I would say it would be one that would revise our system um, for electing the president, because there's certainly starting to be some more movement.
Yeah.
And then question, would the right to privacy be preserved?
Is the right to privacy even really spelled out? That's the
Well,
thing. It's been interpreted. So
yeah,
that's I think the right to privacy is always a little bit on shaky ground, unfortunately,
yeah,
because
because
it's
it's that
not
penumbra.
specifically. Yeah, so
Yeah,
maybe we need an actual amendment that gives us
yeah.
that right to privacy. So that might be an idea too. So
Uh, yeah,
yeah,
I'm going to interpret
good
that
questions.
question
Yeah,
as are we going to include an amendment about the right to privacy, and not a question about whether if it were redone, we would lose that right.
because I certainly
Um,
hope. But
yeah.
well,
Uh,
this has been great, guys. This is
yeah.
really
Yeah.
good. I appreciate the interaction, and I'm really excited for what's to come. And we'll see how that First Amendment has morphed and changed over the many years. And say what the anniversary, because I cannot say that word.
Semi-quincentennial.
The we have to, I'm pleased that we can get together to celebrate the semi-quincentennial
There you go.
together by exploring this stuff. So I want to
Yeah.
thank everybody for joining us tonight. And oh wait, we got something else.
We got a couple. Did the people who wrote the Constitution include women as people to be counted? And yes,
Yes.
women, white women,
Mhm.
were counted in terms of population. But as you acknowledge, they did not have the right to vote for some time. Um, I'm
Oh,
going to skip Sam's question for just a second. Semi-quincentennial does mean half of 500 or
500.
250. Yeah. The Constitution ingrained a complete misbalance of power in favor of small states, and so it seems unlikely that a revision of the Electoral College would happen, given the fact that North and South Dakota have 6 votes in the Electoral Congress, whereas Manhattan, which is equal in size, has 0.
Europe. That's well, we go back to Shays Rebellion. Who are we going to take the power away from people who are rural and simpler and live on great acres of land, but make grow the food that we get, and so it's never, even as 13 states, it was the most complicated country that you could possibly imagine, and look at us now. So I think anything we do is going to be super complicated and take a lot of time. Unfortunately, none of this is simple, because every county is different. Look at us. Every town is different. And somehow we have to all figure out how to live together, I hope.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think
Um, yeah. quarter millennial is easier to say, but
Really
not
easier
as
to
much
say.
fun.
I think Mara has you have some sort of a contest at Westhampton. Tell them
We
what
do.
you're doing.
We're doing a spelling bee. We have like 20 words that I pulled directly from the Declaration. And if you come over to the reference desk, choose one out of our little bucket. And if you can spell it correctly, you get a little pin with the word and candy, because we like to sweeten things up. But it's, there are some tricky words in there.
Yeah.
But it's also a teachable moment because we're sharing, where is it in the Declaration? What does it mean? That kind of thing. So, and it's been
Usurpation is my favorite.
usurpations. Yes,
Yeah,
that's one
that's
of
a
them.
goodie. So I like quarter
Um,
millennial. So
term limits. Since the founding fathers did not intend for anyone to become a career representative, how about term limits?
that would be an
That's
interesting one.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, I could see that. I don't
let's
know that
discuss. It's out
yeah,
there.
I wonder if it wasn't that they didn't intend it or they didn't foresee that anybody would make a career out of it because
Yeah.
it was so outside
And I
their
wonder in
worldview.
terms of
That's
money,
interesting.
if how much
Mm-hmm.
money, because that's a thing. If it's a career, you got to get paid. And maybe those early
Yeah.
representatives were, gentlemen that didn't need to get paid. So it's again, money changes everything. So
Yeah. Well, and until 1992, they could vote themselves a raise if they wanted to.
that's right.
But
So
not anymore.
27th Amendment, right?
27th Amendment. Yep.
There you go. We'll never forget that one.
Mhm.
So, well, okay. I think
All
we're
right.
good. Thank you,
Yes.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I hope we'll
Really fun.
see reorganization of the spring. Okay, Sam, I have places to go. That's this. Sam is my husband, and I appreciate that he's here and really engaged in this, but he's also waiting for me to come take my seat at the theater. So maybe save your questions for next time, Sam. But I like that, a reorganization of the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a lot of good ideas out
lot of
there.
good ideas. A lot of good
So,
ideas.
well, you enjoy your son's play,
Thank you.
and thank you all for coming. This was really fun, and I
This was
think
great.
we're the next 8 months are gonna be really interesting.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Looking forward to see a
Definitely.
lot of you
Thank
in
you, Terry.
February.
Thank you, Mara.
Thank you,
Yes.
Sarah.
okay. See y'all
Thank you,
soon.
guys.
Okay.
Have a
Okay.
good night.
Bye.
Bye.